Good morning to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here. Hurricane outlook and discussion time. Kind of early this morning. Kids are back to school, so I had to get up at 6:15, and I have to go take a certification exam up in New Bern in a couple of hours, and so here I am. And my voice is a little weak today, but that's okay. I'll get used to this early morning stuff soon enough. So it's August 22nd, 2019. A year ago, I was on a plane headed to Hawaii for Hurricane Lane. Not so much this year. Wow, what a difference a year makes, right? All right, let's just get on with it, talk about what's happening out there. No threats to Hawaii, which is right there. Last year it was Category 5 Hurricane Lane, but nothing of the sorts this year. We do have Tropical Storm Evo in the eastern Pacific, Tropical Depression Chantal in the Atlantic, way up in the North Atlantic there, and then a Tropical Storm Bailu over here, which will eventually impact Taiwan. In fact, let's just click on this so I can show you. James Reynolds, the typhoon and other natural phenomenon chaser extraordinaire who lives in Japan, I think he's going to be heading over to the Taiwan region, and this is forecast by the Joint Typhoon Warning Service, or Center, to be roughly the equivalent of a Saffir-Simpson Category 1 hurricane if it was in the Atlantic. It's in the Pacific, so we call them typhoons, and this will bring a lot of rainfall and other perilous hazards to Taiwan as this moves generally towards the northwest, eventually making landfall in mainland China as a big flood threat. You've seen over time, I'm sure, these pretty impressive rock slide, mudslide videos from Taiwan and elsewhere in Asia when these typhoons come in there. They have a lot of mountainous terrain there, and that orographic lift wrings out the moisture, and you can get some pretty impressive rainfall totals, and that tends to bring down the mountains from time to time. So best of luck to James Reynolds as he tackles this soon-to-be typhoon in the western Pacific. Now, elsewhere, not much going on for the time being, but a few areas to monitor. First, in the eastern Pacific, we do have Tropical Storm Evo right here. And clicking on this, you see the forecast over the next several days. Supposed to become a hurricane and eventually turn off towards the north-northwest with time. Maybe some of that moisture can stream off of it and get up into this region, but it's not looking real likely. Later on, as we get into September, any development that we get down here off the coast of Mexico and we start to lower the heights up here to the north, the pressures overall start to ease off and allow these to turn more northerly like we're seeing here with Evo. It's just a matter of time that one of these will come up and get into the Gulf of California and affect the northwest part of Mexico there, and maybe even Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico, possibly even western Texas. But this is not such a time with Evo, so no worries about that out that way. Also in the eastern Pacific, another system, lower chance of development, so no trips to Hawaii for Mark anytime soon, it does appear. In the Atlantic Basin, again, here's Chantal, 1010 millibars up over the North Atlantic. No big problem anymore, not even really too much of an issue for shipping interests. A very small tropical cyclone over cooler water now, so the energy source is starting to wane away, and this will just die off and be a remnant circulation before too long. Now we'll focus on this feature, which we can see in the satellite imagery here, courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com. Here it is down in the Bahamas. So I talked about this recently in my other updates over the last several days, that these fledgling systems, even when they are fledgling systems, can cause problems. And you've got some fairly deep convection with it, some thunderstorm activity that causes lightning. You get the downburst winds, we call that outflow winds from these systems. That can affect boating interest. Anybody down there on jet skis, water skis, parasailing, or just hanging out along the beaches of the Bahamas, this can be a spoiler. So you don't have to have a Hurricane Floyd or an Irma or an Andrew or whatever to make it miserable. It doesn't make it as dangerous for obvious reasons, but nevertheless, there it is. I haven't noticed quite yet that it's labeled as an invest. If so, it will be 98L, unless this beats it to the punch. Yeah, that's a very vigorous tropical wave, moved off the coast of Africa there, fairly low latitude. There's 10 degrees north latitude right there, and we'll have to watch this. It's getting to be, every day that passes, closer and closer to the climatological ramping up of any particular hurricane season. You know, that roller coaster ride, you got to go up before you start to go down again, and this is the beginning of that ramp up, and it'll become fairly rapid as each day goes by. The background state of the atmosphere becomes more conditionally favorable for development. Warm water temperatures are already there. The wind shear is dropping overall, and the wind shear is simply the change in wind direction with height in the atmosphere. So if you have the wind blowing this way and the tropical wave is coming this way, they butt up against each other, whether it's low-level winds or upper-level winds, and that's a shearing mechanism that blows those tops off like blowing out a candle. And when everything gets aligned and everything's going the same way, it's hard to do that, isn't it? But I'll just use my fingers. When everything's going the same way and the upper-level winds are not opposing, mid to upper-level winds are not opposing, then those thunderstorms can blossom up. Vertical motion, we call that convection, and they flourish. And the pressures begin to lower at the surface, and the feedback mechanism begins in earnest. And every day that goes by, we get closer to that naturally happening in the state of the tropics as they change over time. So it's getting closer every day. So we have to be vigilant of these systems, even the fledgling ones. We do have this little area in the Gulf of Mexico, very disorganized. Slug of moisture will eventually get up towards the Gulf Coast states. Be sure to refer to local National Weather Service products, weather.gov, the single biggest crowd-funded weather service that's out there. It's true. If you pay your taxes, and you should, you're funding that. You know, talk about crowdfunding. There you go, weather.gov. All right, in the Eastern Pacific, just a quick look at EVO here. Very well-organized system overall. Look at all this disturbed weather as a whole through this region. This is kind of part of it, but separated enough that it probably isn't going to develop into much. But a little bit of energy in here. We'll take a look at that in a moment when we examine the vorticity, and that's when we kind of look underneath the hood, so to speak, and see what's going on underneath, peering through these clouds. But EVO here poised to become a hurricane at some point, and we will see if any of that moisture gets pulled into the Baja. Other than high-level moisture, does more moisture of any significance make it up that way? We'll just have to see. So looking underneath the hood, like I said, this is what it looks like. The vorticity signature, large amount of overall energy over there, but that circular area is Tropical Storm EVO, bundling that energy. And, you know, you really can't see it too well on satellite over here. Let's get rid of that one. Go to this one. There's the circulation with Chantal, small up there in the North Atlantic, but, you know, it's still there. And you can see the vorticity signature. That's nice and round. That's about as round as you'll get. So it's just because it's sitting over cooler water, and there is some wind shear up there, the winds in the atmosphere, and that's a good example. You can see how this kind of gets blown from west to east here. The winds are stronger blowing over the top of it than the circulation is moving. When everything lines up and it's all in tandem, sometimes shear is not shear if everything's moving in the same direction. But nevertheless, that's what it looks like on the vorticity signature. Then, down here in the Bahamas, our other system, let me change this to white just to make it pop a little better. a little bit of energy down here starting to consolidate. So we're going to have to watch this rather closely. I suspect that the odds for this to develop are going to start to go up today, just a little bit. We'll see. And then lots of energy coming off the coast of Africa, and that will seed the Atlantic. Every one of these that develops as the upward motion focuses over Africa between the convectively coupled Kelvin wave, that fertilizer truck that we talk about from time to time, and just the general pattern of less sinking in the atmosphere over Africa will induce this upward motion, fostering large clusters of thunderstorms to develop, and eventually they'll push off and move westward and literally seed the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific. Sometimes these head over to the East Pacific and develop there. And it's just a matter of time. Remember, it's only August 22nd. We still have 9 days left in the month, and I bet we get a couple of more named storms before it's all said and done. All right, adding to, Mark, where's the evidence of that? Show us the evidence. All right, well, let's look at the Euro model here, courtesy of Levi Cowan and his talents at tropicaltidbits.com. 850 millibars into the atmosphere, about 5,000 feet up. A couple of features that I can point out, but I should use a different color. Let's go with violet. All right, here's your subtropical ridge outline, generally speaking. Large area of high pressure dominating the Atlantic, generating the trade winds on the southern part of it, southerly flow on the southwest and west side of it, and westerly flow generally on the top side of it, the north side. Big old giant ridge of high pressure. These little yellow areas with some oranges and reds and eventually dark reds represent the vorticity or spin in the atmosphere. I look at it as energy. A lot of different ways to interpret it, from a meteorological perspective, a mathematical and physical perspective. But for the layman, which most of us are, including me, I'm a degreed geographer. I don't have a degree in meteorology, so explaining the physical reasons behind this is beyond my capability, but I know what I'm looking at, and I know what to look for, and that's what I try to explain to you. And so you can see that there is energy here, kind of almost like a monsoon trough setting up. Not quite, but it's getting there. But look at the overall curvature here of these wind barbs. You see that in there? In fact, let's just pull this image out and then zoom in on it. Oh, how I love being able to do stuff like that. So follow these wind barbs. There's your northeast flow. And then look how it turns, right? So you have this general, it's almost like a monsoon trough out there. Maybe it is. I didn't even look at the analysis. But again, I know generally what to look for. And you got this westerly wind at 5,000 feet. And then a northeasterly wind here. And so what is that? It's a broad turning, generally speaking, in the atmosphere, and energy coming off with these tropical waves. There you go. That is a pretty important sign right there that things are changing, and we're getting closer to something to try to develop. All right, so that was, let's go back. That was the initial map right there. So this is the Euro ECMWF model initialized last night. All right, so we'll watch this. And then there's the energy in the Bahamas. There is Chantal. All right, so let's put these into motion one at a time, one frame at a time here. So this would be valid tonight. So Thursday night, system in the Bahamas becomes a little bit more vigorous. More of this energy out here off of Africa. Look at that. It even looks like it's trying to curl up a little bit there. Interesting. Things are definitely changing. And 48 hours out, the system down here starts to work its way over the peninsula. Not much development if it's interacting with land. There's Chantal, what's left of it. And then look at the broad turning, clearly evident. See that? Very broad turning in here. This could be interesting to see. If this doesn't develop, it's definitely laying the groundwork for what's coming. And remember, even at 48 hours out, we're only talking about August 23rd, 24th. We still have a week left on the calendar for August. So people talking about no development and the season's not going, come on. It's coming. And then we have all of September and October. Are you kidding me? I want to make sure people don't get lost in, well, if it's not happening now, it's not going to happen. Trust me, sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes it does, like 2013 and other seasons, but I don't think that's going to be the case this year. All right, 72 hours out. Again, wow, this is really interesting over here. But first, interesting over here as well, tucked into the southeast coast there, right off of Georgia, Florida, the Carolinas, etc. And then, wow, look at that impulse over Africa. All this energy over here, setting everything up. It's coming. You can just tell. 96 hours out. This starts to blossom off the coast of the Carolinas there. Wow. I mean, look at that. That just, it's only a matter of time, ladies and gentlemen. It's coming. 120 hours out. This could be a named storm by this point. We'll have to wait and see. Lots and lots of energy trying to gather off Africa, fighting against dry mid-level air, not so much Saharan air layer anymore probably, but just the overall sinking motion that's set up semi-permanently here this year over the Atlantic. And once that relents, it's going to be 2 or 3 named storms at the same time coming across the Atlantic, I do believe. This is 5 days out, so Monday night into next Tuesday, day 6, day 7, and we'll stop it there. A week out, there's plenty to look into the future. There's so much chaos and other things to take into consideration that I am comfortable looking 1 week out, and that's about it. If we ever have a big system and we want to try to look for trends, yes, we can look at days 8, 9, and 10 and start talking about keys to the game, so to speak, but we're not there yet. So you noticed what happened. The system over here tries to develop off the coast, moves out over the Atlantic. That's a rough track of it. Energy certainly out in the eastern Atlantic, seeding what's to come. So if these don't develop here, where do you think these are going to go? They don't just disappear. They end up somewhere over here. And maybe they develop later. And just to give you an idea of our system over here today, this is the Euro model, the UK Met model, also a global model. This is the text output. I showed this yesterday and we'll show you again. New tropical storm forecast to develop after 84 hours. Where? 28.5, 78.5. If you know your lat long, that is just south of Jacksonville, Florida, Cocoa Beach area, maybe somewhere around there. In terms of the latitude, the longitude would be a little over 100 miles offshore of Florida, roughly. And where does it end up? In the time frame here, several days later, what is that, the 28th, night of the 28th, 27th into the 28th, 0Z the 28th, 0 UTC would be 8 p.m. on the 27th. Does that make sense? 36.8, 70.9. Where is that? We can go back to here, and Levi has the lat long, and that's nice because you can just mouse over. So 70.8 and 36. Is that what it said? What did it say? 36.8 and 70.9. So 36.8, 70.9. So right around in there somewhere where my mouse is, roughly. So probably staying offshore. But if this does develop, guess what? Waves. So all the surfers out there, I need to make sure I put that in the tag. Surfers beware. Be ready. This could be at least some wave generating energy for you. And the UK Met says intense and intensifying rapidly. Interesting. So it looks like, if I can get me back on there, well, there we go. Hi. It looks like we will have some things to talk about over the coming days. And that's what I'll do. All right? So real quick, I want to talk about Patreon. Again, not so much from a, hey, please sign up perspective, but to remind you, I'm doing more and more and more with Patreon. I'm using it more of my blog platform. I mean, why write a blog over at HurricaneTrack.com and then post it on Twitter and then post it on Facebook and then post it here, post it there, post it everywhere? I like consolidating everything and being efficient, so I'm doing much more over on Patreon. So if you're already a Patreon patron, Make sure you log in and check things out if you haven't been on for a while. Enable those push notifications or an email notification if you like. And a lot of these I also do publicly. You don't have to be a patron, in other words, paying money to see some of these posts. If they're public, everybody gets to see them. And I am going to be doing a lot more with Patreon going forward. So just keep that in mind. It's growing, and I made an announcement today that's actually public, so be sure to check that out. I'll put a link to it in the discussion. This is the discussion. In the description of the discussion. Real quick, I want to give a heartfelt thanks to make sure I get the name right, the Eichenlaub family. I knew I was going to mess that up. Ron, I can get their first names right, from Pennsylvania. Ron, Gina, James, and Alex, their 2 kids, were visiting Wrightsville Beach, and they follow me on YouTube. And he sent me an email and wanted to take me out to dinner, and I took him up on that offer. And he, a great family, keen interest, especially from Ron, at what I'm doing. And a couple of bright kids, and he has 2 kids. I have 7. So I don't know what that matters to anything, but just there you go. It would have been a little bit harder to bring 7 people out to dinner, 7 kids. I know, trust me. But I really appreciate that. Got to ride around in his Tesla. He let me drive it. It's the first time I've ever driven one. And it's too bad they don't make a Tesla SUV. I guess that would kind of go against the whole, I mean, you'd have to have like 1,000 batteries to run that thing. But it's really, really neat that I can get an email from somebody that's a fan and appreciates what I'm doing from Pennsylvania, and it doesn't matter where you're from. You could be from Alberta, Canada. And if you're vacationing down here and you want to meet up, hit me up. That'd be great. And I love meeting people, so that was really special. So Ron and Gina and your 2 wonderful boys, thank you very much. It was nice to meet you, and I appreciate the dinner last night. It was great conversation, and that ride in the Tesla Model 3, we'll have to just see about that sometime down the road. All right, so there you go. That is it from me. I'm headed up to New Bern. I'm taking an FAA certification today. Looking forward to that. I'll talk more about that later. That's actually going to be pretty cool. I don't want to jinx myself, so I've been real quiet about it. But that's coming up at noon at the airport up there in New Bern. Anyway, I am Mark Seth, HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks, as always, for tuning in from however and whatever device you happen to be using. I greatly appreciate it, and it allows me to meet people like Ron and his family. Have a great rest of your Thursday. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.